The camera, a device that's been used for centuries to capture memories and moments in time. Some use it for artistic purposes, while others wish to document events from their everyday lives. But for me, someone with low vision, a camera lets me see the world in a way I normally can't. It not only brings things into focus, but it offers me a creative outlet. In the past few months, I became curious about how other blind and visually impaired people were pursuing the visual arts, which drove me to create the documentary you're now watching. After coming up with this concept, it wasn't long before I was in search for artists similar to myself. Of course, this was more difficult than I could have imagined. Google search after Google search hardly gave me any leads and no useful results. Luckily, I had met Stephanie many months back at a local art show, and when I proposed my ideas, she was more than happy to participate in my project. My friend Melissa was also a huge help thanks to her connections with the National Federation of the Blind. She was able to send out a mass email to NFB members, which only got one response. That response was from Tina in Kansas City. Thanks to programs such as Skype, I was able to include Tina, end my search, and begin filming.
Okay, how I first became interested in art was in school. I believe the first art class I took, or the first year I took art, I took a liking to it immediately. And I can remember my mother will tell the story that my elementary school art teacher had called her and said, "Your child's really excelling in my art class," when I was recommended for the Gifted and Talented Arts program. And at that time, teachers were really confused because they did know that I had limited vision. And I do remember an art teacher actually asking me, "How do you make your artwork? And how are you going to do this when you can't see?" and such, at a very, very young age. But I was just drawn to art for whatever reason. I just was born that way.
And I took art in high school, but we were doing still lives and portraits and figure drawing, rather, and those were really difficult for me for obvious reasons. And it wasn't until we started doing landscapes that the world opened up to me in the art field, because I could see the sky and basic buildings and trees and stuff, and I'm very good at seeing bright colors, not dark colors. So it worked really well for me, and I wanted to be an art major in college and be an art teacher, but in high school, my rehabilitation counselor for the blind said that was unrealistic for me, since I was legally blind from birth, to go into that field.
So the first year of college, drawing one, painting one, still life, was horrible. I remember my drawing teacher in 1992, and I still to this day just cringe when I think of, I won't say his name. He, from the very start, when I, at the beginning of every class in college, and high school for that matter, and pretty much my whole life, my thing would be to approach the teacher the first day after the class and say, "My name's Stephanie, I have a vision challenge, I can't see." Then they say, "Well, what do you mean? Explain yourself." And when I got into the art classes, of course, then I'm encountered with, "Well, how are you going to see this?" And my answer is, "Well, I don't know, but I want to do this class." So this teacher was like almost aggravated that how dare I come and take up space in his art class, when I'm not going to be capable of doing it, drawing the bottles and fruit, 20 feet away, which I wasn't. I couldn't see it. It could have been like a moose for all I know. It's shadow and light. So that did create a challenge, and I did experience a lot of frustration, and I didn't really progress or learn much about art making for the first 3 years of my college education in art.
Up at the top, and I can't really see it, but I bet you can see it, that once I'm putting the dye on, it's running through the fabric, through the silk because of the water. Now for me, with my vision disability, the more light I can use and the closer I can be to things helps, but the other thing that really helps is contrast. And this is a bright, bright color against a white background, so it's very easy for me to see. I don't see the details, but I see the broad color line. So I've done 2 different swirls on this with this color. And there's a big white area. The silk scarves I learned how to do after I suffered a traumatic brain injury from an assault and was attacked from behind and had 2 blows, hard blows to the back of my head. And I wasn't able to do painting for 7 years, and a fiber artist friend that I teach with taught me different techniques in dyeing silk. And I buy white silk scarves with and without fringe of different sizes and velvet silk scarves. And I picked out the technique that worked for me the best. And it didn't take a long time to do. It wasn't a lot of steps, so that it was a lot for me to remember. And it didn't require real fine finger dexterity, which I was lacking after my injury and during my rehabilitation. And ironically, the scarves are what I still do today.
I think my vision absolutely affects the way my art looks when it's finished. If you look at it, most of my work is generally a bit out of focus, the imagery. And a lot of the collage elements really are very, I'm really into intricately connecting lines and designing out of patterns and making new patterns and new lines and new shapes out of several other shapes and patterns and intricately weaving them together to make a new image. And I think the reason why I like doing that so much is because of the lack of sight that I do have. You know, I look at the real world. I think my eyes or my imagination is very active in trying to make up for what I can't see always, and it's always creating things. Like if I look out right now and see things that I can't recognize, I already like kind of draw it in my mind's eye like what it is. And usually it's very curly and swirly and I don't know.
Yes, it does definitely have an impact on it. I had to realize early on that I couldn't do what other people do, like going up and memorizing something and going back and creating a still life. And one of my friends in college said that he used a camera and he spent expensive expensive lenses to create the blurred and distorted images and for his photography. And here I could do it naturally, and that I should do it that way. And I never forgot that. And after that, I would do more abstract work, and I use a big drafting table with 4 lights on it, 100-watt bulbs in each one. And I have an overhead light, and I'm in a room with 4 windows, so during the day it's nice and bright in there. So light and brightness helps me to create my work.
I have to, well, I guess I don't have to, but I find that it's probably best for me to work in the early morning hours. The lighting is best. I don't do well with my medium, mixed media collage. It's difficult for me to see contrast in papers and cutting things out accurately using lamps and such at nighttime. It's better to work in natural daylight. So I have to work between the hours of 7 a.m. and 2 p.m. My eyes get tired at a certain point and I have to give up and stop even though I don't want to. So that limits my time to work.
Yeah, I think I have been successful as an artist, both teaching typical children as well as gifted children and kids with special ed needs, as well as adults that are typical adults, as well as vision impaired adults and a few seniors too. So the teaching has been a big part of it, but in my own career as an artist, I have my own studio in my apartment and do create the different silk scarves that I sell to a gallery. And, well, I have them on consignment, in the gallery. And then in a women's clothing shop, I have scarves locally, and I've done real well with that. And then I've had paintings in different art shows and have some paintings at the gallery right now too.
So I had a very successful show this past February and sold several pieces. And now I'm working on hopefully doing a show in the next 2 months. But before that, before I had my daughter, I was doing shows in California where I used to live. And not selling a ton of work, but enough, again, to sustain with a combination of my other jobs. But at the time, that really wasn't deterring me from working at all.
They're usually surprised, and then they automatically assume I do three-dimensional art, which is sculpture, and work in clay and that type of thing, and ceramics. And I've done some of that work before, but they're usually surprised, and they're really surprised when I tell them what I do. The silk scarves and the thick silk charmeuse silk that I dye and make into landscapes and cut the fabric as well as the paintings that I do.
So I usually find that after I talk to someone for a couple of minutes, they're like, oh yeah, so you can see some. You know, I think that the label, like visually impaired or legally blind, like immediately scares people, and then they're like, oh, you can't see, and it just doesn't make any sense to them. But blind people, like sighted people, enjoy self-expression and the creative process and everything that regular sighted people, regular is probably not the best word to use, sighted people like to do.